Rabbi, I don't hear you. I don't hear you.
How about now?
Yep.
Do we need some pictures today? Yeah, we'll need some pictures today. Oh, I take away my mask. Okay, good. With the help of Hashem, we are learning ERUVIN Daf Pei Dalid. We are learning about 3 areas, Chatzar Aleph, Chatzar Beis, and a 3rd area. So when the 3rd area is either easily accessible to both, and the word that Chazal are using for easily accessible is when they use the word Pesach. In other words, there's just like a door, easy access from area Aleph to 3, and from area Beis to 3. Since Aleph and Beis did not make an Eruv with each other, each one made an Eruv separately. But since they were not Ma'arav altogether, and they both have equal access to area 3, so none of them can carry to and from area 3, if it's both easily accessible. Similarly, if it's both difficult, if the access is with difficulty, and the words for difficulty is either zrika or shilshul. Zrika means that area 3 is above Aleph and Beis. So going there means if they would want to bring something there. The example that we're giving is they would have to throw something up, an upward motion. Or if area 3 is below Aleph and Beis, below A and B. In other words, if they were to want to carry something to 3 or from 3, they would have to be mishal shalit. Shilshul means downward motion. Here again, there was no debate. They ased one on the other. Shneim asurim. However, where we left off is the Amar Rav Nachman. What's going to happen? That it's not easy for one more than the other. But lezeb is shilshul or lezeb is rika. Area Aleph and Beis. Area Gimel for Aleph is above. For Beis is below. Rav holds Zrika and Shilshul are also considered equally difficult, and therefore Shneim Asurim. And Shmuel is of the opinion that since going down, we all know that is easier than going up. So if it's one Bezrika and one Beshilshul, Noisnin Oisei Lezesh Beshilshul. That is where we left off. And Daf Pei Dalid, literally, the whole daf is going to try to refute one opinion over the other. We're going to learn many interesting concepts. Just to give you one example, that if you have a mound, in other words, you have a chatzir, and then you have a mound, and as of now, the mound is easily accessible. Another important intro, chazara. Easily accessible means that it's within 10 tfachim. You don't even have to go neither up nor down 10 tfachim. Right now, it's with less than 10 tfachim. But there's a possibility that the mound will get diminished. So the halacha is, we're going to conclude that since it could get diminished, we already view it as if it is diminished. And we no longer view it as an area to which there's easy access. But the big chiddush we're going to have in today's daf will be a daf Pei Daled Amud Beis. Abaya is not going to disagree with any of the premises that we just laid out. But he'll add something very important. That it's not only about usage or about easy access. There is another very important issue that we have to look at, and that is that in the case where A and B, where Chatzar Aleph and Beis, they themselves are not distinctly separated, because one is, let's say, higher than the other, but less than 10 tfachim, there is no wall separating them. Yes, they're separated, but not, as we'll go into more details, distinctly separated. Over there, the halacha will be that even if area 3, which is what we're discussing the whole time, is easily accessible to Aleph and not easily accessible to Chatzar Beis, neither of them can use it, because the distinction between Aleph and Beis itself is not that clear. And that's something that we'll try to prove. At the end, we will fail to prove Abaya's premise, but Abaya will stand with this nuance, with this chiddush, as we will, God willing, learn together. We left off on Daf Pei Gimel Amud Beis. We left off 4 lines before the bottom of the Amud. Right? We just reviewed the machlekes between Rav and Shmuel that we have to have clear when we go into the sugya. Shmuel says again that if it's la'echad bezrika or la'echad b'shulshul shneim asurim, and Shmuel holds that noisnin oisay lezeh sheb'shulshul. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Eloheinu shakal nimedvarim. The entire Daf Pei Daled Amud Aleph, we're going to go over the Mishnah that we learned yesterday. The Mishnah Daf Pei Gimel Amud Beis. The Mishnah is vague, and we're going to try to use the Mishnah to prove one side or the other. So let's begin. Instead of reviewing it by heart, mamash, we're going to go through the entire Mishnah and the Gemara again. Amachaya. Tanan. We learned in our Mishnah, that was the beginning, that if you have an Anshe Chatzir v'Anshe Mirpeses, when we call Aleph Beis, the Aleph and Beis is that you have people that live downstairs, and therefore their homes go directly into the Chatzir. You have people that's we spoke about, we already mentioned yesterday that it's not clear. Anshe Mirpeses, if you want, you can put a picture on the screen, but Anshe Mirpeses means that there's a second story, L'chura, and the people from the second story first go into this porch, they go into the Mirpeses, and from the Mirpeses, they have to take another ladder going down into the Chatzir. Now, Avade, if the Anshe Chatzir and the Anshe Mirpeses, if they were all ma'arif together, that's a great, leave that picture up there. Finish, Amachai is good. The whole case of the Mishnah is that the people that live upstairs, they were only ma'arif with themselves. The people that live downstairs were only ma'arif with themselves. And again, to go back to Daf Ayin Hey, we don't follow Rabbi Akiva. No, since the people that live upstairs did make an eruv with the upstairs, and therefore it's called the regel hamuteres b'mekoimo, the fact that they, yes, will go down the ladder and they will go into the chutzner to get out, that b'chlal does not create a problem. It does not ruin the eruv that the Anshe Chatzir made in the Chatzir. What is the issue in the Mishnah? The first case of the Mishnah is that there is, let's say, some sort of platform, some sort of pillar that's on the Chatzir that goes up. So that's how we learned that if the platform is within 10 tefachim from the Chatzir, we give it to the Chatzir. If it is 10 tefachim or more above the Chatzir, which means it's not easily accessible to the Chatzir, let's read it inside. Right? Anshe Chatzir Anshe Mirpeses, Sheshachachu v'lo yervu. Sheshachachu v'lo yervu means that they did make an eruv, each with their own domain, but they were not ma'arav all together. Koil means like you had in the picture, just there's a pillar, there's a platform. So if it's 10 tefachim above the ground of the Chatzir Kama, which means that it's not easily accessible to the Chatzir, to whom do you give it to? You give it Limer Now I would rather you put up Shleim the picture you put prior, because that you'll see the problem in a moment. Now hold on, you know what the Mishnah didn't clarify? Okay, I get it, that it's above 10 tefachim from the Chatzir, but how lower is it than the Mirpeses? The Mishnah didn't say that. The Havamina, the question that we're going to have now, is predicated on the assumption that no one who lives upstairs walks straight out onto the Mirpeses. For them to get to the Mirpeses, as you have in this picture, they have to go down a ladder, which means that if you're looking at them from their homes to the top of this platform, it's 10 tefachim down. But nevertheless, the Mishnah writes, Limir Peses. It's only if Pachos Michan, if the pillar is lower than 10 tefachim off the ground, which means it's easily accessible to the Anshe Chatzir, only then do you give it to the Chatzir. Says the Gemara, Kasal Kadaitach. We're bringing this Mishnah based on the Havamina, that my Mirpeses doesn't mean that people like go out from their house straight into the porch. It means Daf Pei Daled B'nei Aliyah. B'nei Aliyah means that normally the Mirpeses is taken not that high. And people that live downstairs, they don't want to have a ceiling that's sitting on their heads. It's a normal elevator, I don't know, 10 foot, whatever the norm is. Which means, you think about, guys, I'm speaking about 10 feet. Here we're talking about 10 tefachim, which means that the second story is high up. For them to come to the Mirpeses, they have to take a ladder down. Which means that if we are viewing their home to the top of the platform, right? Umay, or the Bach adds, the Amai Karol Mirpeses, they're not B'nei Mirpeses, they're B'nei Aliyah. Because the Kosolki Bim Mirpeses, their first way out is going down to the Mirpeses. If that's the case, So again, even when the platform is 10 tefachim above the chatzar, it's still 10 tefachim or more below the Bnei Aliyah, because the Bnei Aliyah are much higher than the merpeses. So l'chayra, that is the case of Rav Nachman, that it's difficult for this. No one has a Pesach. L'zeh b'zrika or l'zeh b'shilshul, and the Mishnah says you give it l'zeh b'shilshul. It's mamash like Shmuel, like Hashanav. Alma kol l'zeh b'shilshul, which is what it is for the Bnei Aliyah, and l'zeh b'zrika, because it's not a Pesach, because it's 10 tefachim or more above the ground. Noisn l'zeh b'shilshul. Clear a proof to Shmuel, clear a kasha, enough. So the Gemara answers no. That just like the Amar Rafuna elsewhere, the elsewhere, my friends, will be in a few lines. The elsewhere is in this Mishnah, but in another clause that Rafuna clarified. The case of the Mishnah is like Shlomo, the other picture, that it's not Bnei Aliyah. The people of the upstairs, when they walk out straight to the platform. They don't have to go down to the platform. In other words, when you have a pillar that's 10 tefachim or more above the chatzir, it's within 10 tefachim of the merpeses. That's called l'zeh pesach or l'zeh zrika. No one debates that. Hachinami, so just like Rafuna explained later, that's a much better picture. So here you see, my friends, that for the people that are on the porch, for them to get to the top of the platform that's on the left, they don't have to go down 10 tefachim. That's called pesach. Hachinami, just like Rafuna said it later, which is indeed why the Mishnah says you give it to the merpeses. Hold on, asks the Gemara. Guys, we're going to push it, go through the entire Mishnah. It says in the Sefer Pachus Mikan that if the platform is not 10 tefachim above the ground, if it's within, it's under 10 tefachim, you give it to the chatzir. Why is that? Why is that? Even if this platform is lower than 10 tefachim above the ground of the chatzir, so lebnei chatzir, to the top of the platform, it's Pesach, it's easily accessible. If the people live by the merpeses, then for them to go down to the top of the platform, it's also less than 10. So l'zeh Pesach or l'zeh Pesach. In the Mishnah we learned, and not the Gemara made a klal, if that's the case, shnei masurim. Amai, why is it given to the chatzir? This is your classical case of l'zeh Pesach or l'zeh Pesach. It should have been asur on both. Says the Gemara, this is exactly what the Mishnah means. Why l'chatzir? If it's lower than 10 tefachim, l'chatzir means af l'chatzir, and therefore it's self-understood. The Mishnah doesn't have to spell out the last line that the Gemara will, which is ushnei masurim. Wow. And hachinami mistabra. Mi diktani seifa bamed dvaram amurim b'semucha. When is there a time that you give the third chatzir, whether it is in this example the top of a platform, whether it's the top of a cellar, the third area, when is it given to the merpeses? As a general rule says in the Mishnah, that's only if the merpeses is near the third area. As the Mishnah said, near means it's less than 4 tefachim away. But whenever it's been mufleges, then even meaning that from the merpeses to the third area, you have to go over 4 tefachim. That makes it, that's not a Pesach. So the Mishnah writes, even if that third area is above 10 tefachim from the chatzir, right? Then what? Then you give it to the chatzir. Why? If it's above 10 tefachim from the chatzir, then it's not benachas to the chatzir. Moide that if it's mufleges, it's not benachas to the merpeses. But again, if it's equal, it doesn't matter whether it's equally easy or equally difficult, then one asr is on the other. Why? Amai Rishusa Ditrabayu, who it's equally difficult for both. Elamai, just like it's clear that when the Mishnah writes the Bamed Varamurim clause, even though the Mishnah says L'chatzir, it doesn't mean L'chatzir, and therefore you give it to the Bnei HaChatzir. Af L'chatzir means, now you have a case where it's equally difficult, not only to the Merpeses, but also to the Chatzir, and therefore V'shnei Masurim. So coming back closer up to the beginning of the Mishnah, Hachinami, my L'chatzir, Af L'chatzir, V'shnei Masurim Shmamina. In other words, Atkan, Rav is not refuted from our Mishnah. And now, my friends, let's move on to the next clause in the Mishnah. Tanan. Chulyas Haboir. Chulyas Haboir, we said, is the embankment around a pit. I mean, there's a paradox here. The pit is very deep. The embankment, which is the earth that you put around the pit, the earth that came from the pit, actually creates a mound around and above the height of the ground. Now, what are we referring to in the Mishnah? Are we referring to making usage of down in the pit? Or are we referring to making use of the top of the mound? So we're going to see that in a moment. But chulias haboir, or if you have a cellar, it's very similar to the first case. If we had a pillar, we had a platform. Here you have a stone, something natural. So here again, the Mishnah writes, if shehein gevoyin asara, you have to put a comma here, if not you get confused. If they are 10 tfachim or more above the ground of what? Of the chatzir, which means that for the chatzir, the accessibility is with difficulty. Then, says the Mishnah, you give it to the merpeses. And here again, the question will be obvious. Even though it's difficult for the chatzir, based on the havamina, that's where Rav Huna said is din, that the people don't live on the merpeses. They live in much higher than the merpeses. So if you're viewing them to the top of this, it's more than 10 tfachim. Is zicher if there's a pit, if it's zicher, then it's much lower. But the Mishnah says merpeses. If it's pachos mikan, but if this either chulias haboir or the selam is not 10 tfachim above the ground of the chatzir, then you give it to the chatzir. So here again, the kasha is, when it is 10 tfachim or more above the chatzir, why would you give it to the merpeses? If the merpeses, the people that live, again, the havamina is, they live on a second story. You don't make a second story at 15 tfachim off the ground. You make it much taller, which means they go down to the merpeses, but they are much higher up, which means they are much higher than 10 tfachim above it. So this is lezeb zrika, lebnei achatzir lezrika, to the bnei Aliyah b'shilshul, and according to Shmuel, it's perfect. According to Shmuel, shilshul is called easy, relative to the zrika, but not according to Rav. So again, akasha on Rav, it was here that Amar Afunan, that the case must be not that the people that live upstairs live substantially high upstairs. It was a very weird built house. The height of the first story was mamish garnished. In other words, that when people live, those who are called the bnei merpeses, they will have access to the top of the chulias haboir, or certainly to the top of the cellar, without even needing to go down 10 tfachim. So for them, it's called lezeba pesach. Lezeba pesach or lezeba zrika, then you're nice than lezeba pesach. So the Gemara says, well, that fits. You're bringing down the guys from upstairs. They're not living on the Aliyah. They are already living closer to the ground. So that works if the case was where there is a rock. The rock means there's something going up. So if it's 10 tvachim or more above the chatzir, it's getting closer to the merpeses. As long as the people upstairs don't live that high up, it's taket lezeh to the upstairs bepesach. But the boir, the Mishnah gave two cases. And l'chayra chulias haboir, we're speaking about making use l'cha'ura of down in the pit. Lower. For them, it's even lower. Ma'ikal amemer. The bottom of the pit is for sure 10 tvachim or more under the merpeses, even according to Rafuna. And therefore, why would we have to give it what? It's only kasha nav. According to Shmuel, it's not a kasha. Why not? Even though the boir is zicher further deeper down away from the merpeses, but the bnei chatzar have to first go up because there's a mound. So going up and going down, going up is called zrika. So if the mound is 10 tvachim, so the bnei chatzar have to go up to go down. The merpeses, it can be not 10 tvachim. From the merpeses, it's 20 tvachim. It's 30 tvachim. It's only down. According to Shmuel, it's not easy to any of them. The mound is already 10. The chulias haboir is 10 tvachim or more. So it's lezeh bezrika, ulezeh b'shilshul. L'shmuel is gavaldik. The Mishnah says chulias haboir, if it's 10 tvachim above the ground of the chatzah, you give it to the merpeses. But according to Rav, lezeh bezrika, lezeh b'shilshul is equal, we view it equally difficult. Then why would the Mishnah write? Why would you give it to the merpeses? Good. So says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Berei Rav Yehuda. Therefore, it must be we are not speaking about. That's great. You guys just look at the picture over here. It's a great picture. You can see that the merpeses is taka not that high off the ground. That's the whole point over here. And again, you can see that people that live in the merpeses only have to go down People that live in the chutzner have to go up, but the people in the chutzner that have to go up 10 tefachim or more. That's called zrika. People in the merpeses, to get to the top of the water is less than 10 tefachim. According to Rab and Achanami, if it would have been 10 tefachim or more deeper, then lezeb zrika, lezeb shilshul, it's equal shnei masurim. But the water is towards the top of the bird. And what usage are we talking about? We're talking about who is allowed to take water out of the pit. So on that, the Mishnah says that if the chulias haboir is 10 tefachim or more above the ground of the chatzir, which means l'bnei chatzir is difficult, zrika, the top of the water is within 10 tefachim, going down from the mirpesas, Pesach and zrika, l'kul alma noislin l'zeh Pesach. Problem is, asks the Gemara, according to you, Rav, again, that the moment the water level will go 10 tefachim or lower from the mirpesas, then it's going to be lezeb zrika, lezeb shulshul shnei masurim. If you allow the bnei mirpesas to take water out of the pit, it's inevitable. Every time you take water out, what happens? The top of the water level goes down. So sooner or later, v'ha chasra. And the moment it's going to be chasra, then, according to Rav, it should become shnei masurim. The Mishnah never says such a thing. So the Gemara gives, the first statement is, and a chanami, even after the water level goes down, since at the onset of Shabbos, the water level was higher, so getting the water from the top of the pit, libnei mirpesas, is called Pesach, even if later it becomes b'shilshul, kiven the chimalia, malia means in the beginning, when Shabbos comes in, if you want to fill up your bucket, it's muter because then it's within 10 tefachim from the mirpesas. So ki chasra nami, we say sharia. And guys, we had this concept in other areas, even though really you cannot really compare every one case to the other, right? Sometimes we had the concept that the Eruv Techumin, the Eruv was there from the beginning. It's good for the whole Shabbos. We are applying that concept over here, and the Gemara is going to refute it. And the Gemara is going to claim that our case is different. Adarabba, not only different, it's 180 degrees different. Adarabba, what we should say is, Kiven de Kichasra, since we know that you have a scenario where it's permissible to take the water out. So you know that sooner or later, when people make use of the water, every time you take water out, the top of the water level goes down. You know that during Shabbos, it's going to get under 10 tefachim. It's going to be 10 tefachim and more under the mirpesas. So we should say that even kimalia namasira. Wow. Pum fakert. And that's the rule that have a davar hanitel b'Shabbos. If taking the water out would have involved an isser, then we would have said it. But if you know from the beginning that it will not last, this height will not last, you can't count on it from the beginning. Now, this is a very important halachic concept. We do have even when it comes to parts of ERUVIN. What happens if before Shabbos the Eruv is up, but you know that during Shabbos it will be knocked down? Like it's very windy, and you know that this Eruv only lasts for 2-3 hours. It's going to get knocked down. There's a big question whether you can rely on it even when it's up, because of this concept. So Ella, because of this kasha, this kasha again is only on Ab. According to Shmuel, there's no problem. According to Shmuel, I don't care if the chulias haboir is empty. If the top guy only has to go shilshul, and the guy in the chutzah, because of the chulias haboir, has to go up and go down, that's it. You give it to the guy on top. All this is lit up. Not that the pit is filled with water, it's filled with fruit. Now, what did we accomplish? Nothing. So you'll take the fruit out. So the Gemara says again, so you substituted water from fruit. And the Bnei Mirpesas can remove the fruit. So again, v'chasri. Answers the Gemara, no. Let Abaye finish speaking. It's fruit that is muktzah, which is tevel. So hold on. So the question is not whether you can take the fruit out. No, you push it. You want to put something on top of the fruit. You want to be mishtamesh with that location, which is the whole topic. You have a third area. Can you use it? Using it means, can you bring things from your reshus to it? Can you take something from it to your reshus? And since the pit is filled with peta, the top of the petas is less than 10 tefachim below the mirpesas. So even L'Rav, Lezeh to the Mid-Pesach, it's called Pesach, less than 10 Tvachim. To the Chatzir, there's a Chulia, there's a mound. So to get to it, you have to go up 10. Lezeh Bezrika, Noisnen Mid-Pesach. And now the Gemara says, Daikanama, because it says, Dumi Desela. How ironic. Dumi Desela, just like Sela is up, and you're not taking the Sela, you're using the top of the Sela for your own stuff. So Shema Mino indeed. But now the problem is, if Bishleima, if the meaning of Chulias Habar would have been the way it is according to Shmuel, if it would have been the way we have it in the Havamina, that you're making use to the bottom of the pit. So the Mishnah has to give two cases where you have a Sela, you're using something high, and you're using something low. But if we're speaking about there's a boir, but the boir has on it paytis, which is tevel, which is muksa. So it's just like a Sela. You know, you're repeating the same scenario. No, this question is like a ihachi. If this is the case, so the Gemara says no, they're both needed. Because the iyashmin and selam, by sela there is no gezeda. What will be the gezeda? What's the precautionary decree? I'll tell you in a moment. But when it comes to a boir, maybe one would have thought that what were to happen if the boir won't be filled with tevel fruit? What happens if the boir is filled with something that's not muktzah? Whether it is with mesukin fruit or I don't know, with water. In that scenario, according to Rav, no one will be, you might say, no one can use it. Why can no one use it? Because it will become depleted. It will become lezeh b'shilshul. L'Rav lezeh b'zikah b'shilshul shnei masurim. Oh, so why don't, maybe you can say that even if it's filled with muktzah, never use it. Gzeira, Dilma, Aval Bar, Ligzer, Zimnan, the Maliyah, Veres Misukanim. So that's why the Mishnah had to give the other example to tell you that Rav holds we make no such a gzeira. But again, no refutation was made against Rav from our Mishnah. Gewaltig. Weiter. Now we finished the Mishnah. Now we're going to go to a Brais. Tashuma. Anshe Chatzir v'Anshe Aliyah. Same thing. Now, guys, here you have the words v'Anshe Aliyah. Clearly, the guys that live upstairs don't live on the same level of the Mirpesas. That was the original Havamin of our Mishnah. They live much higher up, and there's a ladder linking them from the upstairs into the Mirpesas. Sheshakhu v'layirvu. Each one made an eruv with their own domain, but they did not make an eruv with each other. Says the Braisa. What are we talking about on the Braisa? Guys, there's a wall. Now, how do you make use of a vertical wall? The Gemara is going to explain in a moment. The lower 10 tfachim and lower the wall, again, it's lezeh meaning lechatzir bepesach, so they have the right to use it. V'anshe aliyah mishtamshim ba'asara elyonim, because 10 tfachim and higher up is to the bnei aliyah called a pesach. And now the Braisa says, what are you talking about using a wall? You go use a vertical wall. Clarifies the Braisa, we're speaking about aziz. Aziz means a ledge. 4x4, guys, it's important to remember. 4x4, because if any of the third area, and our whole sugya Rashi wrote on the Mishnah yesterday, is less than 4x4, what is that called? A makim ptur. Makim ptur is okay. We're speaking about a third area that is a reshus b'fnei atzmai. Oh, okay. So there's a ziz, so that's why I'm saying a ziz means it's 4x4, and it's yotzim in akaisel. So we're saying lamata masara lachatzim, lamay lamasara laliyah. End of Braisa. Comes the Gemara and asks Gavaldik, let's make an inference. Let's be medayek. Well, the Mishnah, the Braisa spoke about the higher ziz, the lower ziz. What about the in between? What were to happen if there's a ziz in between? The kasha is asked based on a havamina that the wall is zikr more than 20 tvachim. There aren't only two options, whether the ziz is coming out lamato from yud or close to yud on the top. What about in between? Hadabeni yobeni. It's mashma. The fact that the Mishnah, the Braisa is only telling you what you could use. You know why the Braisa didn't mention it? Because you cannot use it. Hold on. That now we have a kasha against Shmuel. According to that, it's perfect. Of course not. Because if something is in between, it means it's not lezeba pesach or lezeba something else. Lezeba zeh, it's difficult. But anything in between, by default, lebnei aliyah getting to it will be b'shilshul. For the bnei achatz it is zrika. According to Rav, lezebe shilshul, lezebe zrika, shneim asurim. But according to Shmuel, that says that when you compare zrika and shilshul, shilshul is called easier access. So why does the Braisa imply kashan Shmuel? Amarav Nachman must be because Tisha Asar Askinon. Rashi goes into the nuance. It can be exactly 20 because the ziz itself takes up some space. Don't infer anything from our Mishnah. According to from the Braisa, according to Shmuel, if there would have been a ziz coming out from a place where it's distant, side from the bottom, side from the top 10 tefachim or more, according to Shmuel, you give it lebnei Aliyah. Lezebe shulshul or lezebe zrika noislan lebnei ashilshul. The Braisa doesn't have such. There is no beini ubeini. If you have a wall that's 19 tvachim, the ziz is either going to be closer to the bottom, under 10 of the bottom, or under 10 in the top. And the ziz yoytzi memenu is also lamata masara makes it. Lezeh means, guys, to the chatzar, because since it's less than 10, it's called Pesach. And in that case, if it's 19 tefachim, if it's within 10 tefachim of the ground, automatically it means it's more than 10 tefachim, 10 tefachim or more from the top, which is called shilshul. No one debates Pesach and shilshul. Even l'shmuel, Pesach is easier. And likewise, the last line of the Amid, if this ziz is above, in this 19 tefach tall wall, if it's above 10 from the ground, automatically it means it's within 10 tefachim from the Bnei Aliyah, which means lezeh. Lezeh means to the Aliyah. It's called a Pesach. To the bottom, you said it's Lamayla Masana. It's called Zrika. L'kol ha'alma. That's why the Braisa gives these two scenarios. It's either Noislan L'bnei Achatzer or Noislan L'bnei Aliyah. We did not refute Shmuel. Daf pay Dalad Amid Beis. Oh. Gavalik. Guys, we're learning a Mishnah that we're going to have on Daf Pei Zayin in a few days. Halt up to the Mishnah over here. Let's review a few there. Danny, you're very excited. This is so good. You have a house in Venice. Showing. It means the house is right on top of water, mamash on top of a body of water. We learned that if you have a picture, if not, okay, we learned that a water has a din of a karmelis. Oh, gavaldik picture. The house is a reshus hayachid. So koydem kol, what you need to know is that if people, if you have a picture, what you have is you're going to have two porches, two balconies that are coming out of different reshuyos in the house. But just to make it clear that every balcony is not servicing the way you think your private home. Many people in that area of the home have access to balcony number one. Many other people in the home have access to balcony number two. Before we get into two balconies, just to explain the challenge here is that for you to be allowed to bring water up from the body of water into the house, you're violating your rabbinic law, which is you're bringing something from a karmelis into a reshus hayachid. So forget about you being ma'arev chatzedes in the house. Forget about that. You can't bring from a karmelis into a reshus hayachid. So Chazal came ahead and they said that we're going to make the floating mechitza. We're going to make the partition, even though that we learned when it comes to putting a wall over dry land, theoretically, Allah Moshe Sinai, good achis mechitza. Remember that? Like by Yasuka, achis means it comes down. But see, if you need the walls to touch the ground, mele, if it's less than 3 tvachim, lavud. If it's 3 tvachim or more above the ground, even though there is a concept of good achis mechitza that is applied in many other times, but if the mechitza has to come until the ground, we say the concept, remember, of giddi'im boikenboy. Since physical little animals can go back and forth, they break the good achis mechitza. We don't say good achis mechitza over a body of water. We learned this together, my friends. I fish, swim back and forth. It doesn't bother us. And therefore, we have a Gavaldic solution. You make a hole in the balcony, a hole in the ground. Now, the hole should be, guys, 4 by 4 tefachim or more. What am I doing? We are creating a reshus hayachid in the water. How do you do that? If you make a 4 by 4, then build what we would call a box that is open from the top and the bottom. Put mechitzas up on all 4 sides. Now, I hear in the picture, this is a practical picture. They put the box going under the balcony. I want you to know the same exact would have happened had they put the box, the mechitzas, over the balcony. But then you're losing space in the balcony. The point is, the moment you have mechitzas of 10 tfachim or higher, and inside the mechitzas there's a space of 4 by 4, so that area is called a Rishus HaYachid. Based on the principle of good achis mechitzta, you know what halacha says? These mechitzas don't only go down to the top of the surface of the water, they go down in the water, which means the water that is inside these halachic mechitzas are already in a Rishus HaYachid. Now you can draw the water up into because you're not taking it mikaramelis l'Rishus HaYachid, you're taking it from a Rishus HaYachid to a Rishus HaYachid. Okay, very good. Now here's the case of the Mishnah. You didn't have one balcony, you had two balconies. Now, guys, now we're already bringing it similar to the case of our Mishnah. Balcony Aleph was higher. That's the case. Balcony Beis is lower. We'll see that detail. When it says here in the top line of the Amid, Zula Maila Mizua, when you see a picture, you see it. It does not mean one above the other in a way that the top balcony, that if someone cannot build a sukkah in the bottom balcony. No, Zula Maila Mizu means that each one is a good sukkah porch, each one is under the heavens, but they're not exactly aligned. Like in the picture, just to see that. No, it's going from one to the other simply because one is higher than the other creates some sort of difficulty. Now, the case of the Mishnah is the people that live in the lower balcony built no such halachic partition. But they also get water during the week. How do they get water? They go out into their lower balcony. They throw, it's close, they throw the bucket, which will go up, and then it's going to go through the hole, and it's going to go down, and they're going to schlep up the water, and then they're going to bring the water from the higher balcony down to them. If they were all ma'ariv, amachaya. Say the problem here was, whoever has access to the top balcony, they're good. If there's more than one, they made an eruv for themselves. The bottom balcony made an eruv. But the b'nei of the top gezustera and the other ones were not ma'ariv. So you would say, well, the guys who are in the bottom, my friends, you can't use it. Okay, the Mishnah says much more than that. Shnei gezustera zula ma'ila mizu. If asul elyono is not referring to a halacha of eruv chatzeres, asul elyono means that, like in the picture, only the top balcony has those mechitzas that use the rule of good achas mechitztan, were makel by mayim, and they, if it would only be them, they can schlep the water. But the guys that live in the bottom have no such partitions, which means that they want to use the gezustera elyonim for their water on Shabbos, on Yom Tiv. Shnei masuros. That's the chiddush. Shnei masuros at sheyarvu. Now let's halt up. Why? Why can't the people that live on top? Why? They're going out onto the balcony and they're taking the bucket and they're using they're taking water from Rishus HaYachid. I'll tell you why. Gewaldig. The gezustra elyoina is like Chatzar Aleph. The gezustra tachtoin is like Chatzar Beis. The contraption, it's a mechitza. It's like its own Rishus HaYachid. You build a mechitza with 4 by 4. It's a third Rishus. That hole is a third Rishus. Now, legally, they all have the rights to it. And what are we learning in our Mishnah? That whenever you have a third Rishus, if both parties have equal access to it, either equally easy or equally difficult, Shnei Masurim. So the Mishnah is saying that one aser is on the other. Now hold on. The people that live on the Gezustra Elyoina, how do they use it? All they need to do is a downward movement. They are already on their balcony. They put the bucket down and they get the water. I'm not talking about schlepping it up, but they use it by being mishalshel. The guys that are living in the Gezustra, that's why Zula Mailam is the guys that live in the lower one. I know, again, it's like the Chulya we had on Amud Aleph. At the end, the bucket has to go down, but before the bucket gets down, they have to throw it up. You have to throw it up. One goes up, one goes down. So according to Shmuel, who says that whenever it's one up and one down, relative, the shilshul is easy. You give it to the shilshul, so the people that live in the upper balcony, they should have the rights to use it. Wow. Kashan Shmuel. So here we have two answers. Omar Rav Ada Barahava. This is so geschmack. Beboyim b'nei tachtoyne derech al yoyne lamalois. You're missing one important point. Well, what throwing? Who throwing? You know why the people in the lower balcony did not build their own contraption? Because they managed to have a ladder or a ramp that connects the lower balcony to the higher balcony. So they don't throw anything. It's legal. In other words, I know you have to make an eruv, but I'm saying that was the agreement that they have. When they use it, they walk up. So they both of them use the boyd. We're speaking about using this mechitza, this contraption. They both use it only shilshul. Shilshul, lezeh, lezeh, b'shilshul. It's equal. Since they were not ma'ariv, no one can use it. We're calling that two reshuyas. That's Gavaldik. No, three reshuyas. Yeah, we're calling, the same thing we had in the Mishnah. Correct. Because it's called a Pesach, a Chaloim, but it's not one. And now,
Rabbi, are we saying right now the two balconies are within 10 tefachim of each other, or it doesn't matter?
We didn't mention that yet. Now we spoke this out in the intro. Now, guys, this is the whole neshamot of today's stuff. We learn. 3 chatzeros. Again, guys, the whole topic here is Chatzer Aleph is good, Chatzer Beis is good. Question is, who has the rights to Chatzer Gimel? And we made the klal that we in the beginning of today's daf. Abaya adds something fundamental. It's like from the left field. It's not only about who has easier access. Chatzer 3 is more functional to Aleph or to Beis. That's not the only thing you have to look at. We need for Aleph and Beis themselves to be considered distinct reshuyos. If you have two distinct reshuyos, Aleph and Beis, like the examples we have, two chatzeros, or in the case in the Mishnah, you have a b'nei chatzer b'nei mirpeses. It's distinct, it's completely separated. And then there is a third domain. And you want to know who gets the right to use the third domain? All of the rules that we said stand. With the end, machlokes Rav and Shmuel. Over here, if the top balcony would have been 10 tefachim or more higher than the lower balcony, that's called distinct. Even though there's a ladder. Yeah, ladder, no ladder. A ladder is only like a door. It's like having a wall, shleima, and then there's a door in between. It's distinct with a Pesach. But if the height of the top and the bottom is less than 10 tefachim, they are not even viewed as clearly distinguished reshuyos. And therefore, once we established that the bottom ones cannot use it, why not? Because they have to throw it up. If one cannot use it, the other cannot use it as well. One answers the other because they're not separated. Amar Abaya Amar, that the Mishnah must be going the kaim in the toy chasar ladadi. We're speaking about both of these gezus teroyos. And therefore, let's now beautifully learn the Mishnah again. Why did we say Zula Maila Mizu? Why not Zu al Sadzu? It could have been even more. It could have been Zula Maila Mizu, and this halachic mechitza was made in the lower one. And that the Mishnah is telling you the biggest chiddush. So now the Gemara is adding in between the lines. The loimi baya ka'amar. Loimi baya, that's what the Mishnah really means, is to imply that if the ones who live in the lower one, they were the ones that made the contraption. The kiv and the asiri, that neither of them can use these Shabbos partitions. Why is that? Because the kiv and the bego yud the hadadi kaimen. Because of this concept of Abai introducing. They're the same reshus, and I'll add another nuance. How do they both get there? Or going down. Using the third reshus is always a downward movement. And they are so close together. Avada asr and adadi, because they were not ma'arif together. The word of the Mishnah is even in the case where this Shabbos partition over the waters was made in the higher balcony. Here you might have argued, at the end of the day, Kivin de Lozeba Nachas. Why Lozeba Nachas? Because the guys that live on the top balcony, they're there. They don't have to do anything. Guys, even if there's no ladder, Lozeba Kasha means they have to go up. And let's go with Shmuel. Shmuel holds that going up is harder than going down. If it's Lozeba Zrika, Lozeba Shilshul, Noishel, Lozeba Shilshul. So you would think, let at least the upper balcony get the rights to use it. Komash Malan, this new din that Abai is introducing, that Kiven de Begoy Asora Kayamin, Since we say that the B'nai Gezustera Hatachtoina may not use it because they have to go up, if it's Asr on them and the higher balcony is viewed as one Ashus. Now, Abaya has to prove this. Where do you get this from? So he's going to attempt to prove it. We're going to refute the proof, but Abaya is going to stand. Now we're going to learn today's final case. Here you need to have a picture. I'll do my best to articulate it, not to run through it. What is the picture? So guys, listen to this. We're learning something we never learned before. You have a building that has
כך הולכים בבית.
Huh? I didn't see it yet. You have a gag. Let me read the words before the picture comes up. You have a gag hasamach l'reshus harab. You have a building that has a roof. All right. Okay. It's an interesting picture. We'll get used to all these new pictures. Hey, guys, look at not the mirpeses. Don't get confused with the mirpeses. There is a roof that belongs to a house that obviously is built on an incline, but it could be that when you stand on a reshus harabim, you are mamish touching the wall of a house, and the gag is 10 tfachim or more above the reshus harabim. Guys, if there is a gag that is lower than 10 tfachim of the reshus harabim, especially if the people, in the reshus harabim use it to be mekatef their backpacks, it becomes, the domain is a reshus harabim. If they're not mekatef, so if you have an area of 4x4, but it is not 10 tfachim, there are no 10 tfachim as a din of a carmelis. Here we're looking at a gag that normally you would think has a din of a reshus hayachid, because it's above the reshus harabim with mechitzas of 10 tfachim or more. It's dalad by dalad. So what we will be machadish today, not on Shabbos, but an ERUVIN point, is that when you have a gag that is mamish adjacent to the reshus harabim, if the b'nei reshus harabim make use of it, only by a gag. We would not say this by a chatzir. We would not say it in any other type of reshus hayachid. Gag is a domain that was used the least by the people that live in the house. So the din is that this gag might be connected to the reshus harabim, and if that would be the case, then dinah ki reshus harabim. But hold on, that's not the whole story here. You also have a mirpeses. Now the mirpeses goes down from the gag less than 10 tfachim, and the bottom of the mirpeses to the reshus harabim is again less than 10 tfachim. But again, you have to explain something. If the mirpeses to the ground of the reshus harabim is less than 10 tfachim, so then it should have a din of a carmelis. So it must be, that's why you have in the cute picture here, this yellow fence. It must be that the floor of the mirpeses is close to the reshus harabim. But halachically, it's sectioned off with mechitzas, and then there's a Pesach, which makes the mirpeses separated from with a fence. If you notice, the gag has no fence. Again, that's a big thing over here. Like this, the mirpeses zicher adin of a reshus hayachid. The gag is used both for the mirpeses, from the gag to the mirpeses, and the gag is used directly to the reshus harabim. So in the context of our sugya, there are two chatzeres that we are clear with. The reshus harabim is the reshus harabim. That's one area. The mirpeses is clearly another area. Here the kasha is, my friends. Here the kasha is, I don't like this picture so much for something else. The way we're going to learn the Gemara. Okay, that's fine. Okay, it's fine. The question is, who does the gag belong to halachically? And again, Rav Rashi points out, and the other Rishonim point out, what's even the havamina? A gag is a reshus b'fnei yatzmei. It's 10 tfachim above the reshus harabim. The answer is no. In such a picture, since it's so near the reshus harabim, there's no fence, and the people that live in the house don't use the gag so much. If not for the mirpeses here, then we would give the gag lebnei reshus harabim, which would make it part of the reshus harabim. So let's go over here. But here we're not even speaking about carrying on the gag. We're speaking about, can you carry from a location to the gag or not? So gag hasamach l'reshus harabim. So Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel says, tzarich sulam kavua lahatiri. In our picture, the sulam kavua was created between the gag, not on the merpeses, which was the way I learned the Gemara, but this is just as good. That if you have a sulam kavua that connects the gag with another reshus hayachid, that is when we can say the gag is not the reshus harabim, because there is a fixed ladder allowing people in a reshus hayachid. In this picture, it's not from the merpeses to the gag, but there, you can see over here, there's another Aliyah, there's another area that's clearly a Reshus HaYachid, that's not mamish under the Reshus HaRabim, that's a Reshus HaYachid. So as long as it's clear that the gag is for the use of another Reshus HaYachid, that is what separates the gag from the Reshus HaRabim, which implies that Sulam Kavua in, if there would be even a Sulam, but only a Sulam Arai, then Loi, then we may not use the gag. My Tama, hold on. Lav mishum the kiven the betoich asara the hadadi kaimi osri hadadi. Let me ask you a question. Forget about the sulam kivu on the picture. People have access to the gag from the street, but as we mentioned, the top of the gag from the floor of the street is 10 tvachim or more. That there's nothing to talk about. What is that called? It's called zrika. They have access to it, bizrika. There is a merpeses here. Like we mentioned, the floor of the merpeses from the floor of the gag is less than 10 tvachim, as is the floor of the merpeses to the street. I know that. So we already said there's a fence around it. If not, the whole thing doesn't work. The merpeses is a vadei reshus hayachid. We learned, what was the kolam that we learned today? That if you have a third area, the third area is the gag. That's where people get tripped up over here. The two areas is the reshus harabim versus the merpeses. Well, lezeh bepesach, because from the merpeses to the gag, it's less than 10 tvachim. Easy. Lezel reshus harabim bizrika. Why do I need to have a sulam kavua? Says Abaye. Let's apply the rule, and the only answer will be like Abaye introduced. Look at the merpeses and the reshus harabim. Since the floor of the merpeses and the reshus harabim themselves are not 10 tvachim or more separated, like in the two gezus teroyos, that means that these two reshuos that we're debating, we're asking on gag. Gag is the chatzar 3. But what's the aleph and base? The merpeses and the reshus harabim. In a case where merpeses and the reshus harabim themselves are within 10 tvachim, they're not considered distinct. It's asr lebnei reshus harabim. So if not for the sulam kavua that's connecting the gag to here in this picture to another reshus hayachid, we would not say automatically the gag is going l'zeshem a pesach. That's a gavaldik raya of Abaye. It's a raya from an Amoida, but it's a gavaldik raya. Counters the Gemara. Guys, I hope you chop this. This is so good. Says the Gemara, maskiv lot of papa. Maskiv means really you have no raya. As we mentioned, forget about the whole thing of the merpeses. I don't understand something. We learned already. We're into Shabbos ERUVIN. You have a gag. The gag is 10 tvachim above the ground, which means the gag has mechitzos 10 tvachim or more. The gag is 4x4. The gag is a reshus hayachid. What's there to talk about? No, we said that yes, normally yes, but only in a case where the gag is on top. On top doesn't mean it doesn't go over. It means that when you're walking under the reshus harabim, guys, 10 tvachim is what, 32 inches? It's the height of a table. Imagine you're walking on a reshus harabim, and there's a gag right next to you. That's already different. You know how different it is? That here it's different. Here you need a sulam kavua. Maybe not like Abaye. Maybe the merpeses is not considered the same with the reshus harabim. But since the gag is so near the reshus harabim and everyone uses it, now guys, we learned the concept of being mekatev. Being mekatev was a concept that was used. Mekatev means that when you have a amud that's 9 tvachim, less than 10 tvachim, we said that normally less than 10 tvachim, right? Whatever the case will be. If 4x4 will be a din of a carmelis, but if people they straighten their backpacks, it has a din of a reshus harabim. That's by 9. Here we're saying it even by 10. But people don't adjust their backpacks by 10 tvachim. However, the dilma kisharabim mechatvenolav, either bekusma means their hats, or besudra their scarves, bekumsa. Thank you with the hats. In other words, when you have a gag that's mamish on the road, because of the people's using of the gag, bepoyo, which bechlal is why we're saying the gag is not a stama reshus hayachid just the way it is. That will tell us that even though the merpeses also uses the gag, we would not give it to the merpeses. Even though the merpeses benachas, the reshus harabim Kaviyachal bezrika, it's not called bezrika anymore. People travel, people have stuff on them, people de facto use it. Elama, only when there is a sulam kavua that's connecting the gag to a clear Reshus HaYachid, there is where we don't give the dinay of the Reshus HaRabim onto the gag. So Abaya has no raya, but Abaya was not refuted, and Abaya therefore still explains the Mishnah Naf Pei Zayin of the Shtei Gezusterois, adding his chiddush that we learned today. It's not only about lezeba nachas or lezeba kasha. It's not only about the third chatzir is functioning. It's being used by one or the other. It's also about the one or the other, the aleph and the base, whenever they're not considered distinct, which means that they are within 10 tvachim of each other. Then Abaya holds that they will both automatically be usher. In the Vayla Chevra, not Rav nor Shmuel was refuted. To be continued. Wow. That was a great daf. Easy. No math today.